Hey everyone, Tactics here, and today raid prep has finally begun for Midnight Season 1. So I'm going to be taking you through the Dream Rift as well as the first 5 bosses in the Void Spire on both normal and heroic difficulty, discussing everything that you and your group need to know to take these bosses down. A couple points of order before we actually get into it. First, this is going to be based off of beta testing, so it's possible that some things have changed or been tweaked since this testing actually happened, so just keep that in mind. Kind of related to that, I won't be covering the final boss of the Void Spire because we never actually did any testing of it, but I will be putting out a preview video to give my best guess on what the fight will look like. Plus, a couple days after the raid actually launches, I'll put out my full in-depth guide on normal and heroic, so make sure you are subscribed for that. Besides that, just be aware that a lot of the footage I'm going to be using in this video is actually from Mythic tests. Some of them aren't, but most of them are because there were a lot of retests on the beta this time around. So the initial heroic bosses didn't always reflect what they were doing later on. But I'll do my best to point out things that you should not worry about because they're not on normal or heroic. Finally, for tanks, I've minimized talking about your jobs on each of these bosses very much in this video because I do have a standalone video coming for you guys in the next couple days. So check that one out for role specific tips like positioning and when to taunt, that kind of thing. I think that's it for the disclaimers though. So let's get started with the first boss of the Void Spire Imperator version, which is kind of tic-tac-toe in boss form. You see we have markers down on these 8 of the 9 sections, and there's one in the middle. And basically when he does this Shadows Advance ability you see going down the timeline there, he's going to spawn ads in 3 of those. Initially, the very first cast of this seems to be kind of like pseudo random. There's like set patterns, but it's like kind of randomly picked. And then here you have the ability to kill 2 of these ads when they spawn, not with actual damage, but instead with another ability, which the boss is going to throw in a couple seconds here, Umbral Collapse. This is going to be on your tank. So it's back-to-back cast. So one tank will get it, and then you'll be able to explode. Ignore these shields, by the way. That's a mythic mechanic. Soak is going to come out. This deals group damage based on the number of soakers. So you just want to stick like everyone into that, basically. This will blow up this ad, and then we'll move to the next ad. Because this happens back to back, you want to make sure you have a plan, like you've called out which ad you're going to first, pre-positioned, and then called out which ad you're going to second. And then you can use move speeds and everything to get everyone over to the next ad. So lock gates work as well. Everyone soaks on top of this ad. And then there's going to be one ad left, and that ad is going to be the tic-tac-toe marker that he gets for this set of ads. Every single time he's going to get 1. So eventually, if you don't kill the boss in time, he will enrage whenever he gets 3 in a row. I said the first ad spawn is random. You'll notice all the ad spawns beyond this are going to be based off of where you left the first ad. They're going to kind of grow out from there. So you'll want to generally position towards this ad over here now for kind of the remainder of the fight for a little bit less movement. Now, after each set of ads, there is going to be some additional mobs that spawn that your group will need to deal with when Dark Upheaval goes out. So boom, we're going to group them up. This is associated with the tank debuff, so don't worry about that. I'll talk about that in the other video. But basically, we're going to group the ads up in the center of the room. Here come the rest of the ads. And there is an interrupt and pitch bulwark on several of the ads have that, so just keep that interrupted. It's an AoE shield. And you want to make sure these stay away from the boss, and the boss stays away from any marked areas because the boss will enrage. On normal, the boss will not enrage with ads, so you can just leave the boss in the middle here for cleave and bring all the ads under the boss. Totally fine. On heroic, the boss will enrage if he's near the ads. So that's why we separated there. In terms of other abilities, you saw these lines over here. We're getting a better view of it, but they kind of shoot out from the boss. So you just want to make sure you're avoiding those. They deal pretty heavy damage. And then there's just kind of consistent damage for healer to deal with from this Dark Upheaval cast. It goes out, like it's got a, I think it's just it's a hit, and then you have this like debuff on you that kind of pulses for damage. Here's the second set of ads just to kind of show you what this is like. As you can see, they're kind of all spawning off of this initial one that spawned all around it, if that makes sense. And it'll continue doing that for the rest of the fight. So again, we'll destroy 2 with the soaks, move over as a group, soak on top of the next one we're destroying. And then we left the one alive here. There's also an intermission phase on this boss fight, Voidfall. I'll fast forward to that. Basically, when this happens, is a hit of damage, a little knockback, and then he's just going to be channeling this spell, throwing circles on the ground that you need to dodge. And there's going to be like patrols of mobs coming down in lanes. So just kind of find the safe lane and avoid them. Otherwise, the fight just repeats, and you want to kill the boss before you are forced to let him get 3 of those void portals in a row. All right, that is the first boss, Imperator version. Let's move on to boss number 2. Technically, you have the choice here between Voracious and Fallen King. I'm going to assume Voracious is the boss you go to, but it could be either realistically. Tank POV is like a little bit cursed on this boss fight, but I'll try and fast forward through parts to show you better what the fight looks like. This is like the initial hit. It's a pull in. You can see you're getting pulled a little bit in, and then you're getting it knocked back at the end. Pretty large hit. Want to make sure everyone's topped for that. These are pretty important tank soaks here. So just make sure no one else is in them. They will spawn a shockwave. You're going to see here in a second, which everyone will need to make sure they're dodging. So you either want to be really close like this, or you want to be far out and dodge late. Pick one. The first 2 will spawn these crystal walls, and it's the raid's job to make sure that they are destroying them with the parasites that happen in 20 seconds. Now, I'm going to skip here to the second set because that's one that I'm involved with, and you can actually see it properly. So basically what happens, these parasites go out, and they're going to fixate players. I believe there's 6 parasites here we had, and they're going to fixate 5 random players and then the inactive tank. And you need to kill these guys on the wall here. They'll do an AoE on death, which also hits players, so be aware of that. But there's also a smaller circle that will hit the wall, so you need to kill them next to the wall, and that will destroy the wall with a certain number of hits. I believe it's actually only 1 on normal and 2 on heroic, and then on mythic it's 3 is what we're doing here. So you have a lot of breathing room because there's some excess ads, so beware of that. There's also debuffs these guys are putting out. They're putting out slows, magic slows, so you can magic dispel them or you can snare removal them as well. And yeah, we're basically just dodging this shockwave. This is what the far dodge looks like. Just go far and then spin, and we're trying to hit this thing here, blow it up with all of the blister creeps. And the goal is you want to blow them up both walls ideally before Void Beam happens. So here's Void Beam. You can see here he has 1 giant purple hand and the other is normal. This is saying where the beam is starting, and he's going to sweep it across the platform. So in this case, he's starting on our left, so we need to run past the right wall over here to be safe. Sometimes he'll use his other hand, and so he'll sweep in the opposite direction. You need to run past the left wall. So that's kind of how this works here. This is also where the big group damage comes in. As soon as this cast finishes, he's going to start doing pretty heavy damage. So you want healing cooldowns, like we rally, we throw AMZ down where we're supposed to be stacking, that kind of thing. You want big defenses and healing here if possible. Other thing to mention for the ads to make grouping them easier, actually, because I just remembered, you can death grip these ads. So that can be useful. Like you see here, basically how we assigned is, the tank went to one side and we death gripped ads over to this side. Obviously, again, if you only need 1 or 2 on normal, for example, you can just send your tank to one side and everyone else to the other side, and that should be fine as long as you don't kill them early. But just kind of loosely split across the sides, because again, there is some breathing room and you can adapt as long as you're killing them when they're actually near the wall itself. Otherwise, this fight just kind of repeats from there. You can see after this, he's going to do his roar again. He's going to go back to doing the slams to spawn walls, etc., etc. So that is this fight, encounter number 2. Moving on, Fallen King Salhadar. So this is a pretty heavy movement fight where you're going to be following your tank a lot. The main thing is Void Convergence here is going to spawn 2 orbs from 2 out of the 3. Is basically 2 out of the 3 spawning points. He picks 2 of them, spawns orbs. These just run towards the boss constantly. If they reach the boss, it's a wipe. So you want to kind of balance getting close enough for cleave while still making sure they're far enough away that you don't immediately die. So that's something to keep in mind there. On heroic, when these die, they put an 8-second dot on your group. So you need to stagger kill them. That is important. Boom, this is the 8-second dot here. So stagger killing on heroic is important, but on normal, it's not really a big deal. You can just kill them ASAP and then go back to the boss. For some dodging, there's this Shattering Twilight ability. On normal, this only goes on the active tank. On heroic, as you can see, it is bouncing to multiple other targets. Our goal here was basically just to make sure that the boss was melee in range of the boss was safe. So we repositioned such that here, like I'm not shooting through the boss. That was the goal. And see there, that kind of repositioned so it's not shooting through the boss. So that was our goal with these, just keep the boss safe. So if you're targeted by that on heroic, make sure you do that. Otherwise, on normal, just your tank needs to worry about doing it. And the boss doesn't move when you have this debuff going out, which is a good and a bad thing. Good in that you can reposition. Bad in that if there are any of those orbs left alive, they will probably catch him if you haven't created enough distance. So keep that in mind. There are puddles on this boss fight as well. There's a debuff that goes out. I believe it's the command here, which does a debuff, and that will drop a puddle on completion. So you want to make sure you're dropping these out of the way. Yeah, here it is. They'll drop puddles, so they're going towards the edge of the room, and they're going to drop those off. There's some ones from the first cast over here. Just try not to clog up the middle of the room, essentially. Other mechanic is these fractured images. He's going to spawn a bunch of them, and you're just going to need to use an interrupt or CC to stop their shadow fracture. Them not being interruptible here is a mythic mechanic. Don't worry about that. They will all be interruptible on normal and heroic, so you just need to send an interrupt or a CC. AoE CCs are obviously particularly helpful if you're able to get multiple of them at once, but you just want to make sure they don't get their cast off, as they'll leave a giant puddle underneath themselves if it's successful. In terms of group damage, most of this is coming from this dot that is just putting out. It's a pretty long dot, so it's like relatively consistent damage. The players who get that debuff that I mentioned will need a little bit of specific healing onto them. Maybe they need to press a defensive. And then the other source of major damage where you want cooldowns is going to be on the intermission, which happens at 100 energy. So let's fast forward a little bit. When this happens, you want to make sure the boss isn't on a wall and isn't near any puddles. You want to pull him to make sure there's a little bit of a gap, because he's going to do these giant beams around himself. I think it might be less beams on normal and heroic than this one, but it might be the same number of beams. Not 100% sure. But basically just beams around the boss. They're going to rotate. He's going to deal a ton of damage. Again, great spot to put things like AMZs, which can cover multiple areas, rallies, healing cooldown, something here, because this is like the heaviest amount of damage on the fight. Also damage cooldowns here, because the boss is taking 25% more damage during this intermission. So if you can time your cooldowns for this, it is beneficial. I believe that is it though. It just kind of repeats from there. And you just have to deal with those two ads every time they spawn, and then that is pretty much it for this encounter. So there is Fallen King Salhadar. Let's move on to the dragons here, where this is a heroic VOD. This is the first heroic VOD I think I have, because this boss actually functions very differently on heroic and mythic. There's two dragons here. They do not share health, and they will enrage if you either put them within 15 yards of each other, or if their health is more than 10% apart. So you need to make sure that you are splitting your raid kind of in half. Multi-daughters are able to hit both bosses if you have multi-daughters, or even like Destro Warlocks or something like that. But if everyone else, you need to make sure that they are evenly split between these two bosses. In terms of where you'll be, to start, Veilgore is on the ground and Ezerak is in the air, I believe. And basically what's going to happen here is the position of Veilgore controls Ezerak. If you see these like little edges around this circle, if the boss is here, you tank Veilgore here, Ezerak will be over here directly across this circle. So moving the boss on the ground controls the boss in the air. You can move slightly towards the boss this way diagonally, but again, don't get within 15 yards or they will enrage. So we're going to split up here. Something to keep in mind is that there is a tail swipe on both of these bosses. So you want to try and generally stay away from their tail if possible. Notice how we're tanking it such that the tails are kind of pointing away from the group. The group is all in the center, either on the sides of the boss or the front of the boss there. Let's go through the abilities. Tank frontal. Actually, this is not the tank frontal. This is the random target frontal. This will fear anyone inside it. So the target needs to make sure, if you're in the center area, you're either moving up this way or up this way. And then once it goes off, you can just magic dispel them. Obviously, things like Tremor Totem and other fear immunities like the Warrior Shout can be useful here if someone doesn't get out of the group in time. But just kind of, keep an eye on that. If you need to press those, you can press those. This is just a big fear. On the side of this, there's a pretty nasty overlap that comes up shortly into the fight here. We're going to have Null Beam and Void Howl happening at the same time. Void Howl spawns ads around every player. It's like a little splash. You kind of want to loosely spread together and then use like AoE CCs and interrupts and stuff like that to get the ads. Null Beam creates a circle around all players that you need to break. It's going to look like this. I think I break it very quickly. Here it is. Okay, so basically there's this 10-yard circle, and this will form around every single player. They're each going to see their own 10-yard circle. I can only see mine, but they're all going to see their own. And you just need to get out of this 10-yard circle in order to snap this tether and remove the dot damage. Doing so does do a hit of damage. It's relatively small. And then on heroic, the last person to do so does a larger hit of damage to the group and applies a dot, so it does some more damage on heroic specifically. So you want to make sure you're breaking this tether You can stagger it, but you can see like the damage here. It didn't look super scary from breaking it relatively quickly. It's going to depend on what the tuning is like, but just watch your health. If you need to break it in like 2 sets, again, like you assign groups of players to break immediately and groups to not break immediately, especially on heroic, that may be better. It's going to depend on the tuning. And then the void orbs here, you can see some of them. They have really low health and they just kind of spam cast. They are grippable, as you can see there. Gorfine's Grasp does a ton of work against this ability, so something to keep in mind there. Otherwise, you just want to cleave them down quickly. Other big ability here is Gloom, coming up in a few seconds here. This is coming from Ezerak, and this is going to be an orb that the tank aims. So it's on the other tank, I think, there. And basically, you need on normal, you need the tank and then 3 other people to soak that. And then on heroic, you need the tank and 4 other players to soak that. Plus, you need to actually do 2 groups because you will get a 1.5 minute, I believe, debuff whenever you soak, which makes you take a ton more damage when you soak. So basically, normal, you can have the same 3 players soaking. On heroic, you need 2 groups of 4 soaking along with the tank to deal with that. When the tanks are swapping here, by the way, you can tell like no one else is really moving. You don't need to move. Just, you know, if you're assigned to do damage to the other boss and you're assigned to a gloom soak, that is fine as long as you're just making sure you step into that gloom soak when it's going out. In terms of this soak, we shot it towards the far edge here. It makes a big zone of voidy stuff. I can't even see where it is. It's probably blocked by this frontal, but it makes a big void zone. Here it is. And basically it'll also stop not only on hitting the edge of the room, but on hitting another void zone. So you kind of need to shoot these like next to each other throughout the course of the fight so they don't actually take up too much of your space. From here, there is an intermission. Let's fast forward to that. Again, more ads spawning. Intermission's coming here in a second. Boss is going to fly up. There's going to be like a holy barrier in the middle. There's going to be some big ads for you to pick up as the tank. Then you just want to focus this guy down. He like ramps up in damage every 30 seconds. Players will be getting debuffs. Ideally, you want to stay inside this area even with the debuff. So what you kind of want to do is have everyone stack right in the middle. And then these debuffed players can just kind of move out to the edges without cleaving anyone. Ideally, that's how you do it. And just keeps going out for this entire intermission. Pulsing damage. You're still taking heavy damage even though you're in the shield. It just kind of makes it less insane. And then bosses will land again. Ideally, this ad is dead. By the way, you really want to kill it because, as I said, it ramps. It can murder your tank. And then the bosses are switching. So Veilgore is now flying and Ezerak is on the ground. So that is just, it's just going to switch. It's not really any different mechanically, but just keep in mind that it's a different one that you're moving around. All right, that is it for these guys. Let's move on to Light Blinded Vanguard, which is the second last boss of the Void Spire. The last boss of the Void Spire we're covering here. We'll do the Dream Rift next. This is a 3-boss encounter, 3-target cleave the whole time, except sometimes one guy is going to be stationary for a bit, so you only get to cleave 2 of them, but, you know, generally a cleave fight. Beware, when you Bloodlust on this fight, they were gaining Bubble, they were getting Divine Shield, which was purgeable on the beta, so just make sure you're ready with, like, Massive Spells or Purges whenever you press Bloodlust and immediately remove that so you can actually do damage to the bosses. But otherwise, basically how this works is that they're going to alternate based on energy. They have staggered energy levels. One of them's going to hit 100 first. They're going to do their big aura ability. You're going to need to run away from that aura. And then on heroic, that aura drops a big consecration area denial. On normal, it doesn't. So on normal, what you can do is you can bounce between like 2 spots of the room. Put a lock gate down and just bounce between like here and like 40 yards away to get out of the aura. And that's all you need to do. On heroic, because they drop area denial, what we're doing here, as you can see, is we're dragging towards the edge of the room. We're going to drop all the consecration circles around the outside of the room. And then when you run out of space, you can start moving towards the inside of the room. And that's kind of your enrage timer for that difficulty. First one's going to happen pretty quickly here. I'll just fast forward to it. But generally, positioning wise, you do want to stay fairly close together to the bosses if possible, because this is a very heavy, like, sustained damage fight. There's constantly debuffs going out on either the whole group, pulsing damage on random players or specific players, depending, and then stuff to dodge on top of that. It also helps with this ability. So you're going to see this boss go way off over here. This will always charge at the furthest player. So because we didn't all group up here, it's going off towards this person over here. But ideally, if you're all together, you will bait this otherwise low mobility boss towards the same group of player, which is important, especially in your other bosses, because this guy now has a shield and they're going to cast a raid wipe ability. So you want to make sure everyone swaps after this charge, focuses damage into this boss to destroy the shield, and then interrupts blinding light before it goes. See how close we were because of the bad charge. So try and make sure you're charging to a good spot while still dodging, of course. The other thing to keep in mind in this boss is she will be applying healing absorbs, you can see on my frames here, to the closest 3 players every few seconds. So you can bait who these healing absorbs are on. So if you find, wow, I'm getting this massive healing absorb on me, please give me 1 heal. The solution is to make sure whenever you get a healing absorb, or if you get a couple stacks of a healing absorb, you then move away from the war chaplain. That is the person spitting out healing absorbs at the 3 closest players. You can also bait some of these on your tanks, but it's going to depend on the overall damage intake on tanks. I expect it to kind of be high. Who knows what the final tuning is like, though. But again, this is one of those things, like, it's much easier if you're in like the stacked healing altogether to get these healing absorbs, which are constantly spitting out off of you. So just be careful with Avenger's Shield. I believe here it's going to target like everyone. I don't know if this is a mythic mechanic or not, specifically after the general gets empowered. But I think the other sets of Avengers Shield are only on a few players at a time. Yeah, you can see here, just like 4 players at a time. So if you do get targeted by that, make sure you move away from the stack so you're not cleaving your allies. Other than that, the big thing is the soaks. Let me see if I can find a couple of soaks here. Yeah, so it's execution sentence. The soak goes out on Mythic, it was going out on 4 people. Unsure the number of people to go out on. It does seem to prioritize healers. So my guess is like 1 soak per 5 players, if I had to guess, depending on your group. So you just want to split your group between them evenly, assigning them to healers or ground markers or both, because again, prioritizes healers. And just, getting the soaks does a pretty substantial hit of damage and also spits out hammers. So you need to be spread out enough that you can dodge. There was a cheese on beta where you could stack all of them on top of each other and drop like big DRs and live, but I assume they're going to make that not work on live. So just spread out enough that you can avoid these hammers, because they do silence you if hit, which can be quite scary. Otherwise, like I said, you're just kind of rotating around the room, dropping these consecrates down on the ground and going around until you run out of space. Then you move towards the center, and that is kind of the enrage. All right, that is Light Blinded Vanguard. Let's move on to our final boss that we're going to be covering today, Chimeris. So this boss here, another one where you're going to want to make sure you immediately split your raid into 2 totally even groups, because you basically have the like upstairs phase with the boss and the downstairs phase with the ads, and you want even distribution, full split in half. And this is going to go on the Almdust Upheaval cast. So this is a soak on your tank. You send your ad group into this, and groups are just going to be rotating what they're doing anyway. So group 1 goes into this, group 2 is going to stay upstairs. This is what the ad phase looks like here. Boom. Ads are out. They have shields. When you break the shield, they pop up into the boss phase upstairs, and they'll need to kill them. The big thing is that these mobs don't do anything upstairs besides fixate the boss. So if they reach the boss enrages, you wipe, obviously bad. So you don't want to nuke these ads, especially these small ones, which don't have a lot of health right away. You want to make sure your tank picks them up, drags them relatively far away, and then you cleave them down over here to create some distance to give the boss group, the upstairs group, more time to kill them. Colossal Horror here is the big mob. That's where everyone's going to be cleaving off of. Same deal, though. Dies when the shield's gone. And then it'll just fixate on the boss. You can see with these lines. Notably, when they did die, they dropped a puddle on the ground. On Heroic, there is a dot that you can use to clear these. This blue circle around people is a... When you go over the puddles here, boom, it's going to clear them. That is only on Heroic. On Normal, the boss will automatically clear them for you, so you don't need to deal with that at all. But on Heroic, you'll need to make sure you are actually, cleaning your space as you go. Now, let's fast forward here and show you what it looks like on the other side. So here it is, boom. The ad group goes down. I have the boss. They're going to go pick up a bunch of ads. I'm going to be watching here for when these ads start popping up. All the DPS are going to immediately swap because that is a wipe condition here. So you see range, you see hunter pets going out there, melee moving, charging over. They're dealing with these guys, especially as they get close. Everyone's going to swap to them. These smaller guys, you can see there are CCable. So you can use CCs to lock them down. Whereas the big guy is not. So everyone will just need to make sure they're hard swapping to the big guy. And you see I'm moving slightly there with the ads. That is something the tank can do, right? You can kite a little bit with the boss as needed. And then everyone's going to swap to the big guy whenever the big guy spawns because he is very thick and just runs straight at you. So I'm gonna pivot and turn around to get away if I need more space. And that's what the upstairs looks like. Obviously, again, if you get targeted by the debuff, you can go clear, but that's generally what the ads look like. Consume is like the big damage phase. It's like 10 seconds of relatively heavy damage. It's not doing too much here, but that's kind of what it's supposed to be. The other damage is two sources. So first, Caustic Phlegm is just like the sustained damage. It's like a 20-second dot, I think, on everybody. So healers, that's just like your constant damage. Otherwise, when the ads actually spawn, this Rift Emergence cast, this deals a hit of damage to everyone. You can see pretty substantial. So this is kind of the dangerous hit. And then also it's going to put a healing absorb on people at the same time. Boom. This is a healing absorb. So that is kind of the other main phase to be aware of for healers, especially when you split here. Like, for example, these last two players had a hard time clearing their stacks because half our healers went down and half didn't. So only half of our healers are up here helping with that. So something to keep in mind, watch that healing absorb as it can be pretty nasty dot. Otherwise, when the boss hits 100 energy, there's going to be an intermission after consume. Ignore this. I believe this doesn't happen on normal and heroic, but on mythic, you have to go play downstairs. Otherwise, it's just like you're all together. You're all dodging this breath the boss does, just like an Onyxia deep breath across the platform. Keeps putting out damage, of course. It's going to put puddles on the ground, which again, on normal, the boss will automatically clear. On heroic, you'll need to clear with the magic dot that keeps going out in this phase. Otherwise, you're just running in, grouping the mobs. There's a new caster mob over here that you can see, so keep interrupts on the caster mob. And then in phases beyond this one, the ad phases, like the downstairs normal ad phases, that guy will start spawning again. So the first one doesn't have caster ads. The second one doesn't have caster ads, but every single time you go downstairs after the intermission will have a caster ad. So you need to be ready. It can be nice to have one DK in each of the groups just for an immediate death grip towards the big ad to make it a little bit easier. But obviously not all groups are going to have a DK. Worst case, just send a range kick on it. It's not a big deal. Otherwise, the intermission is fairly straightforward. You're just dodging, cleaving ads, and then at the end of it, the boss jumps down in the middle of the room. And this is what clears puddles for normal, and it won't, I believe, clear puddles on heroic or mythic. There we have it, guys. That is my guide to normal and heroic Dream Rift plus Void Spire, at least the first 5 bosses of Void Spire. Hopefully you found it useful, and if you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content like it, including standalone guides for those 2 end bosses, mythic guides for every single boss, and much more. Of course, none of this would be possible without the support of my amazing Patreon, so thank you. Otherwise, thanks to everyone for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.